She walked in like every morning, quiet, invisible, wrapped in worn flannel, trailed by wind and the silence of a life forgotten. A young barista glanced up, disgusted. "You want me to—" The manager cut him off with a quiet nod. "She's harmless. Just give her the usual. Every morning, same corner. Never says a word." She took the cup without eye contact, retreating to her spot by the window. Steam rose. She didn't stir it, didn't sip. Then her hand reached forward. The sleeve slid up. Ink. Sharp. Faded but unmistakable. The barista froze. Eyes wide, hands trembling. That mark. It wasn't a mistake. "Widow Mark," he whispered. "That's not possible." Her name, what little was known of it, was Jenna Rourke. She looked to be in her early 60s, though time had clearly done more than age her. It had hollowed out her presence, stripped away the parts people usually recognized in one another. She had the look of someone who had spent years not just surviving, but avoiding being seen. Jenna had no medical records, no driver's license, no family contacts, no traceable address. Since 2001, she had simply ceased to exist on paper. No tax forms, no hospital admissions, no voter ID. Even among the city's homeless population, she was a phantom. Every morning, like clockwork, she entered the café. She never spoke unless directly addressed, and even then, it was no more than a few clipped words. She didn't meet eyes. She didn't ask for favors. She accepted the coffee offered, no sugar, no milk, and retreated to the same corner booth every time, tucking herself into the shadows of the window blinds like she belonged there. She didn't check her phone. She didn't seem to own one. To the staff, she became a quiet fixture, a barely there figure. They whispered about her behind the counter, calling her Shadow Lady. It wasn't meant cruelly, it was just all they had. She didn't give them much else. But Miles Granger watched her a little differently. A former Marine, now working the morning shift at the cafe, Miles had been trained to observe people. Body language, repetition, threat posture. He noticed how Jenna always sat with her back to the wall, how she scanned reflections in the glass before taking a sip, how her hands never shook, even in the worst weather. It was subtle, but unmistakable. This woman wasn't broken. She was trained. Then there was the tattoo, the thing that shifted everything. One cold morning, when Jenna reached for her coffee, her sleeve slipped back just enough. What Miles saw stopped him in his tracks. A black mark. Simple, sharp, etched with military precision. Not decorative, not stylish. Purposeful. He didn't ask her about it. Not yet. Instead, when his shift ended that evening, Miles sat down at the corner table with his phone and typed in a single phrase. "Widow Mark Tattoo Military." Nothing useful. He tried, "Widow Mark, Special Forces Unit, Female Covert Operations Tattoo." Still nothing. He refined the search again and again. Most results were just noise. Old blog posts, sci-fi fan theories, a few half-baked conspiracy pages. He scanned veteran forums, obscure PDF archives, even the darker edges of encrypted search engines. Then he stumbled onto a single page, an archived file with a dead link, hosted on what looked like an old .gov domain, half buried in a Veterans Network subforum. The title bar read, "OPWM Personnel Flag Query." No actual content loaded, just a blank background. The rest was error code, except for one small note at the top. "This file has been removed due to declassification protocol conflict. Please contact Level 7 Clearance Administration for retrieval request." That was all. No unit name, no mission, no personnel, no context. But it was enough to raise every hair on the back of his neck. Miles sat there a long time, staring at that screen. Jenna had no online footprint, no presence, no connection to anything he could verify. But the tattoo, that term, Widow Mark, had clearly tripped something buried deep in a federal system. And that meant it was real, not a myth, not a drunk soldier story, not a coincidence. She hadn't just disappeared, she had been erased. The next morning she returned again. Same path, same steps, same silence. But this time, as Miles handed her the coffee, his eyes didn't leave her wrist. And this time, She noticed. Miles Granger wasn't the type to be easily haunted, unless he had a reason. After leaving the Marines, he took a simple job, working the morning shift at a small café tucked into a quieter corner of the city. It kept his hands busy and his thoughts just quiet enough. He didn't care for small talk or crowds, but he noticed people. He watched them enter, sit, move, like patterns in a field, like reconnaissance. And Jenna Rourke didn't move like anyone else. After that morning, when the sleeve lifted and the tattoo appeared, Miles couldn't shake it. The image clung to his mind, sharper than any memory from deployment. The triangle, the edges, the faded ink that still looked too deliberate to be casual. It wasn't just a tattoo, it was a signpost. He'd seen it before, or rather, heard of it. Back in Afghanistan, during a rare joint training op with NATO intel groups, an old sergeant had passed around a bottle and told stories not found in any manual. Stories about a unit of women, entirely off the books. Operatives so deep in the shadows they weren't even ghosts, they were rumors. They called them widow marks, the old man said, eyes distant. Not 'cause they were widows, but 'cause you wouldn't see 'em coming. And when you did, something or someone was already gone. Back then, Miles had laughed, figured it was just late-night soldier myth. But now he wasn't so sure. Oh. The next morning, Jenna came in as usual. Same quiet shuffle, same worn coat, same routine. Miles added something new. As he slid her black coffee across the counter, he gently placed a single sugar packet beside it. A small gesture. A test. "Morning, ma'am. Thought you might want one today." She looked at the packet first, then at him. No smile. No thanks. Just a simple flat. "No need, never did." The voice, low, controlled, steady, wasn't the voice of someone defeated. It was the voice of someone who'd given orders and expected them to be followed. Miles didn't push, but he didn't walk away either. He cleaned the counter, slow and deliberate. "Can I ask you something?" She didn't answer, didn't even blink. "Your tattoo?" She cut him off, sharp as a blade. "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." It wasn't a threat. It was a protocol. It was a line from the field, not the street. Miles paused, then shifted strategy. "Just curious," he said with a shrug. "Most folks stir their coffee counterclockwise. You always go the other way." She raised her cup, stirred it once, clockwise, then let the spoon drop gently against the rim. And then, with her eyes still fixed forward, she said something that made his chest tighten. "You still stir clockwise like in field camp. Old habits die hard." He froze. No civilian knew that. In basic field training, Marines were taught subtle patterns to monitor stress responses. Stirring clockwise was one of them. Habit drilled into the muscle for quick mental assessment under pressure. Only someone who'd been there would know that. And more than that, someone who'd led. That night after closing, Miles sat at the counter with a lukewarm pot of coffee and his phone. He searched everything he could. Widow mark military. Widow tattoo special ops. Unlisted female task force. Nothing. Nothing. Still nothing. Until, deep in an old veterans forum, buried under conspiracy threads and classified rumor archives, he found a broken link to a scrubbed government memo. The page barely loaded. Most of it was redacted, but one phrase remained. Operation. Widow mark. Deep cover unit. Redacted. Subjects decoded postmortem. File closed 2001. Postmortem? Closed? Miles leaned back in his chair. Eyes wide, heart heavy. 2001. The exact year Jenna Rourke had vanished from all public records. And now she was here, stirring her coffee the same way Marines were trained, wearing a tattoo no one was supposed to remember. He watched the cafe camera footage from earlier that day again. Jenna sat in the corner, silent, still, predictable down to the second. That kind of discipline? That wasn't just habit. That was protocol. Miles had met survivors. He'd met heroes. But this woman, she wasn't surviving. She was waiting, and she had never left the battlefield. Miles didn't mean to follow her at first. He told himself it wasn't surveillance. It was curiosity. Concern, maybe. A gut instinct he hadn't shaken since his days in uniform. He'd seen too many people vanish behind quiet routines and hollow eyes. Jenna Rourke wasn't hollow. She was hiding. For 3 days, he watched her without being seen. Each morning, she arrived at the cafe at exactly 6:42 a.m., stood just outside for 12 seconds, scanned the sidewalk, then stepped in. She never stayed more than 20 minutes. She never took more than the coffee. Then she disappeared into the streets, always by the same alley, always turning left. On the fourth evening, just after sunset, Miles waited near the alley's mouth, blending into the crowd. When he spotted her silhouette, shoulders hunched, movements efficient, he followed. What he found wasn't what he expected. About 6 blocks down, in a tucked-away lot behind an abandoned car wash, Jenna ducked through a torn vinyl curtain strung between two dumpsters. Behind it was a crude homeless encampment, 3 makeshift tents, a burn barrel, and a dozen people huddled together for warmth. But Jenna didn't settle down. She moved among them, quietly but with purpose. A child was crying. She hushed him with a firm hand and wrapped his foot with gauze torn from a t-shirt. A man with a deep cut on his forearm winced as she poured antiseptic from a crushed bottle. No hesitation, just speed and precision. And when someone handed her a sealed can of beans with no opener, she pulled a folding blade from her coat pocket and, with a movement so smooth it looked choreographed, pierced the seal and popped the lid clean off in under 5 seconds. Not one person around her looked surprised. They were used to it. She was their medic, their protector, their field commander. The next morning, Miles waited for her. Not behind a screen, not with suspicion, just waiting. When she walked in, he slid her coffee across the counter, and instead of returning to the back booth, she paused. He nodded once toward the window. "Would you take a walk with me?" She stared at him for a long time. Then, without a word, she nodded. They sat at a park bench in the corner of an empty courtyard, the wind pushing dry leaves across the sidewalk. Miles didn't speak first. He let the silence breathe. Jenna finally did. "You're not subtle." "I wasn't trying to be," Miles replied softly. "I just wanted to understand." She stared ahead, eyes distant. "You already know more than you should," she murmured, "but I suppose you've earned the rest." And then she told him. Her voice changed. It was no longer hesitant or brittle. It was measured, confident, commanding. She once led Operation Widow Mark, a covert paramilitary unit formed in the early 1990s. The team was small, 6 women, all recruited from various branches, all pulled from missions that had never happened. The unit answered directly to a shadow-level directive team. No uniforms, no rank insignias, no legal protection if things went wrong. "We weren't soldiers," she said. "We were ghosts that cleaned up messes before they could be named." In 1997, their most critical assignment came in extraction of 6 American hostages from a fortified insurgent stronghold near the Balkan interior. The CIA had failed to negotiate. Diplomacy had stalled. Widow Mark was sent in under full silence protocol. No comms, no backup, no rescue plan. The mission was chaos from the start. They breached at midnight, neutralized the outer patrol, and extracted 4 of the 6 hostages within minutes. But halfway through the exfiltration, they were ambushed. Someone had tipped the enemy off. The whole operation collapsed into a firefight in the dark. Jenna made the call. "Fall back, leave me." She provided cover, alone, drawing fire with a diversion maneuver and detonating the outer wall while the others retreated through the sewer route with the hostages. She was hit. She passed out behind enemy lines. When she came to, the mission had already been wiped clean. Her team had made it out. The hostages were saved. And the higher-ups? They pulled the plug. The mission had officially never happened. No medevac. No retrieval. She was marked KIA, case closed. "They erased me," Jenna said, her voice low but even. "Not out of malice. Out of necessity. If I'd made it home, I'd have been a liability, a living contradiction to a mission that didn't exist." She had 2 choices. Try to expose them, and likely disappear for real, or disappear on her own terms. So she did. For 20 years, she lived off the grid. No bank account, no calls, no contact. Every breath she took was borrowed time, and she kept it that way out of respect for the lives that had made it out, because she didn't. She didn't want medals. She didn't want apologies. She just wanted quiet. Until now. Miles didn't speak for a long time. His hands rested in his lap, fists clenched not from anger, but from a helpless awe. She wasn't a ghost. She was a commander who had never been dismissed, just buried alive in red tape and silence. And now she sat beside him in the same worn flannel, holding a paper cup of cheap coffee, still watching the world like a soldier between orders. It started with a cough, a table too close, a man who lingered longer than usual with his notebook and half-finished latte. He was a regular, quiet, mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses, fraying elbow patches on a corduroy jacket. The kind of customer who always tipped in exact change and never looked anyone in the eye. No one ever noticed him, but Miles had. His name was Jeremy Kane, a freelance journalist who occasionally sold veteran interviews to mid-tier online outlets. He was harmless, or so it seemed, until the day he sat one table over from Miles and Jenna in the courtyard. Their conversation hadn't been loud. Jenna barely raised her voice above a whisper, but the wind carried more than sound, and Jeremy, whether by luck or instinct, had caught just enough. A few keywords, a few phrases. Widow Mark, hostage extraction, left behind. That night, Jeremy posted a blog article. The title was sensational. Widow Mark, the ghost unit that never existed until now. It read like conspiracy fiction. It even opened with a disclaimer. What you're about to read sounds implausible. That's why I believe it. He kept names out of it. No mention of Jenna, no photo, no direct accusations. But he described a female ex-operative found living on the streets of their city, tied to a declassified phrase once flagged on a military server. He cited only one source, an off-the-record conversation in a quiet corner of a coffee shop. The article went viral in the worst kind of way. Reddit exploded with speculation. Veteran forums divided into two camps, believers and trolls. YouTubers dissected every word, linking it to other deep state rumors. Most people dismissed it as clickbait, but not everyone. 2 days after the article went up, a black SUV pulled into the parking lane across from the cafe. Not tinted windows, mirrored ones. Government issue. 3 men stepped out. Suits, but not corporate. Military haircuts. Not a smile among them. They didn't go inside right away. They waited, watching. Not for coffee, for confirmation. Miles saw them through the front window while refilling the pastry case. His gut tightened. Jenna hadn't arrived yet. 15 minutes later she did. Same coat, same slow steps. But when she walked through the door, her eyes flicked once, just once, toward the SUV. And in that instant, Miles knew. She recognized them. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She walked to her usual seat like it was just another day. But her voice, when she finally spoke, was low and sharp. They're not here for coffee. Miles tried to downplay it. I'll tell them to leave. I'll call someone. I'll hide you. Jenna didn't laugh. She didn't argue. She simply said, they're not here to thank me. They're here to make sure I stay forgotten. By noon, the men entered. They ordered nothing. They spoke to no one but Miles. One flashed a badge that didn't have a name, just a symbol. The man's voice was smooth, almost polite. We're looking for a woman, mid-60s, homeless, left wrist tattoo. Seen her? Miles shrugged. We get a lot of folks who fit that profile. Sorry. They didn't press. They didn't threaten. But as they left, one paused just long enough to glance over his shoulder at Jenna. Their eyes met. No words. Just a silent acknowledgement. And something else. Regret? Respect? Warning? Miles couldn't tell. Later that evening, long after close, Jenna remained seated in her usual spot. The lights were dimmed, chairs stacked, the last trace of customers gone. I knew this day would come, she said softly, stirring her cold coffee clockwise. Miles sat beside her. Who are they? She exhaled through her nose. Old men in new suits. Some were once like us. One of them, he used to be my CO. Miles turned sharply. You mean he left you there, and now he's here to clean it up? Jenna didn't answer right away. I don't blame him, she finally said. He was following orders. Just like I did. Just like we all did. But they erased you. Her voice was cold. And now someone remembered. For the first time, Miles saw something new in her eyes. Not fear. Not anger. Readiness. the look of someone who had waited 20 years for the past to catch up and was finally ready to look it in the eye. Jenna didn't ask permission. She didn't notify anyone, didn't RSVP. She simply showed up, as she had always done, on her own terms. The event was a local Veterans Honor Conference held in the auditorium of a converted armory, now a civic center. Folded chairs lined the space. Flags hung from exposed beams. On stage, a podium stood flanked by banners of every military branch. It was a routine ceremony, speeches, salutes, medals for those whose names were already known. Miles had found the flyer 2 nights earlier and left it on Jenna's table without a word. She hadn't reacted at the time, but now here she was, standing in the back of the room as a retired general gave his keynote address. The man behind the podium was Major General Abram Whitlock, once a legend in special operations, now a consultant to the Department of Defense. He was speaking about legacy, valor, and the debt owed to those who served silently. His voice was strong despite his age, and the crowd respected him. And though not all warriors wear medals, all warriors leave marks behind, he said, pausing for effect. That was when Jenna moved. Slow, measured. Her boots echoed lightly against the hardwood floor. She didn't wear anything flashy, just the same worn coat, flannel shirt, and scuffed shoes. But she walked with purpose. A few people turned their heads, then a few more. By the time she reached the front row, the room was silent. Jenna climbed the 3 steps to the stage. She didn't speak. She didn't ask for the mic. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small silver dish, tarnished at the edges but unmistakable in its shape. A wide, flat plate engraved with a dark triangle and fading symbols around the rim. No unit insignia, no name. Just the mark. The widow's mark. She placed it gently on the podium. General Whitlock's voice stopped mid-sentence. He stared at the dish like it had appeared from a dream. Then he looked at her, truly looked. For a long moment, he said nothing. And then slowly, he removed his medals, stepped back from the microphone, and descended the stage. The sound of his footsteps felt louder than the speeches had. He approached Jenna with visible restraint, his posture straight but his hands trembling slightly at his sides. He stopped just short of her, eyes glassy. And then he saluted. Not the standard hand-to-brow salute seen on parade grounds. No, this was different. One hand over the heart, the other closed into a fist resting lightly against the opposite shoulder. A salute known only to one group. "I never thought I'd see you again," he said, his voice barely audible. "Widow 1. Gasps broke the silence. Someone in the crowd muttered, "No way." Another whispered, "That unit didn't exist." But no one moved. The general turned to the audience and raised one hand. "Cameras off," he said firmly. "Press, step out." A few reporters hesitated, but 2 plainclothes guards from the back stepped forward. The message was clear. Within seconds, the camera lights clicked off. Journalists shuffled toward the exits, confused and grumbling. But the veterans? They stayed seated, eyes forward. And then, one by one, they began to rise. No cue, no signal, just recognition. Each one stood and held the same hand-over-heart salute. From front row to back, row by row, men and women of all ages, some with canes, some in wheelchairs, others with polished boots and crisp uniforms, stood in silent unity. Miles, seated near the rear, stood too. The air was still, heavy. Jenna didn't say a word. She didn't weep. She didn't flinch. But her fingers brushed the edge of the silver plate one last time before she turned to leave. As she stepped off the stage, someone moved to stop her. Perhaps a well-meaning aide, or maybe someone who still wanted answers. But General Whitlock raised a single hand. "Let her go," he said. "She's already given more than enough." Outside, the sky had turned a deep, moody blue. Jenna moved like she always did, quietly, without fanfare. Miles caught up to her on the side ramp, breath caught somewhere in his throat. "You didn't have to go up there," he said. She gave a half smile. Not wide, not warm, but real. "Didn't do it for them," she replied. "Did it for the ones who never made it back." Miles looked down at the small bag in her hand. Just a folded coat, her thermos, and a single yellowed envelope sticking out the top. "What happens now?" he asked. She gave a soft shrug. "Whatever was buried is out now. If they come for me, they'll have to come in daylight." And with that, she disappeared into the shadows beyond the parking lot. Not running, not hiding, just walking away as she always had. But this time, the world had finally seen her. By morning, Jenna was gone. No warning, no note, just an empty seat in the back corner of the cafe and the faint smell of coffee that still clung to the cushion where she always sat. Miles noticed it first. She was never late, never missed a morning. He waited past 7, then 8. But deep down, he already knew. She wasn't coming back. She had said what she needed to say, done what she needed to do. The world had seen her. That was enough. It wasn't until the next afternoon that the envelope arrived. No return address, no name. Just the cafe's name handwritten in clean, sharp cursive. Inside was a single photograph, slightly grainy, black and white, likely taken from a distance. In it, Jenna stood alone before a memorial wall, her head bowed, one hand resting gently against a line of etched names. The photo had no caption, no timestamp, but Miles recognized the wall instantly. It was a secluded section of Arlington, one not open to the public, reserved for unlisted missions and unnamed casualties. Only someone with clearance or a buried past could have found it. She hadn't disappeared. She went to say goodbye. That night, as Miles closed the shop, a soft ding came from his phone. An email. No subject line. No sender. Just a file attachment labeled Widow M1 Final.pdf. He hesitated, then clicked. The document opened slowly, as though reluctant to be seen. On the first page in bold letters were the words, Operation Widow Mark, now declassified. No other pages, no signatures, no explanation, just silence. But for Miles, it said everything. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She was history, real, recorded, remembered. The next morning before opening the shop, Miles reached for the chipped ceramic cup Jenna had used every day, the one he'd always washed himself, never letting the dishwasher staff touch it. He cleaned it once more, carefully. Then he placed it on the shelf above the register. Not hidden, not behind glass. Just visible, like a quiet salute. One of the new hires, a young barista named Casey, noticed and asked, "Whose cup is that?" Miles didn't turn. He just looked out the front window for a long moment before answering. "Someone important. She used to come in every morning. Never judge who walks in that door," he added, voice low but firm. "Some carry entire wars on their back." Outside, the wind shifted, and somewhere far beyond the glass and the noise in the streets that forget too quickly, a woman in a worn flannel coat kept walking. And maybe that's the lesson here. In a world that moves faster every day, where stories disappear with a swipe, some battles never make the headlines. Some heroes never step onto a podium. They walk among us, quietly and visibly, carrying memories no one asks about and scars no one sees. Jenna Rourke wasn't just a woman with a past. She was a reminder that valor doesn't always wear medals, that silence can speak volumes, and that some people disappear not because they're lost, but because we stopped looking. In today's America, we often forget the elderly, the homeless, the quiet ones in the corner. But what if the woman crossing the street used to lead an entire unit in the shadows? What if the man holding the door once held a rifle to defend strangers he'd never meet? This story isn't just about one forgotten soldier. It's about all the stories we overlook every day. So now we turn it over to you. What would you do if someone like Jenna walked into your life? Have you ever met someone who turned out to be more than they seemed? Or maybe you carry your own story no one's ever heard. Let us know in the comments. We read everyone. This is a space for reflection, respect, and maybe rediscovery. And if this story moved you, even just a little, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. It helps more than you know, especially for those still waiting to be seen. Because in the end, heroes don't always disappear. Sometimes they're just waiting for someone to finally notice.